Hey there, it's Bill Hiltz from Dental Fraud Busters. I want to talk a little bit today about why people justify stealing. What you're looking at here is Cressy's famous fraud triangle, and he says these are the three main framework for spotting high pressure or high risk fraud situations. And the first, someone has to be under intense financial or emotional pressure that can push them towards fraud. The next one is opportunity. They have the opportunity to steal and execute their plan without getting caught, and that's a very easy thing to do in many dental practices. And lastly, they have to rationalize their bad behavior. They have to rationalize or justify their dishonest actions. And I want to talk today about that rationalization. What makes people rationalize that it's okay to steal? And in that, there's this concept called techniques of neutralization. There's psychological research papers published on this. And essentially, when people who have some sense of guilt or empathy, unless you're a complete psychopath and you have absolutely no empathy, or you're a sociopath with no empathy, you will use a technique of neutralization to say, oh, what I did wasn't so bad. And perhaps we've all done that in our own lives, where we've done something we know is wrong, and then we try and tell ourselves, well, it wasn't that wrong, and they come up with reasons why you do it. Well, here someone's committing a crime, and they're stealing from your dental practice. And there are 5 different main techniques of neutralization, and 3 of them I see predominantly used to rationalize theft from a dentist. One is denial of responsibility. I was a victim of circumstance and I was forced into a situation beyond my control. It wasn't my fault. This is a very common one. Denial of injury. And denial of injury insists that their actions didn't cause any harm or damage. Hey, it wasn't a big deal and the doctor could afford the loss. And I see this one very often. Then there's denial of the victim. And with denial of the victim, what we see is they believe the victim had it coming to them. They believe the victim deserved whatever action the offender committed. They had it coming. I see this one. This one I don't see too often. Condemn the condemner. You were just as bad in your day. That's when you steal something or you do something bad to harm somebody, and then you compare yourself to them and say, well, you would have done the same thing. And the last one, appeal to higher loyalties. Now, this one has great interest to me. There's a psychologist, Dr. Linda Grounds, who's done research in this, and there's more researchers besides her. And this is when somebody commits a crime for the greater good which justified their actions. My friends needed me. What was I going to do? Now, because the majority of dental embezzlers are female, the appeal to higher loyalties is one of the main justifications used. Let's talk a little bit more about that. This is Amy Wilson. Now, Amy didn't work in a dental practice, but she did have an interview in a magazine. Amy could have easily been voted one of the persons who was not going to get in trouble. She spent 2 years in prison. She stole over $350,000 from her employer, which was a small family-run business, and she worked for an office manager as many years. So I want to talk about the techniques of neutralization that Amy used. She gave an interview, and I'm going to give you a snippet from that interview. And Amy's answers to the questions are textbook, and I observe these as justification methods by employees. The first one is appeal to higher loyalties. Amy felt her offense was for the greater good. So Market Watch magazine said, what did you do with the money? I was codependent. I thrived on the appreciation that people gave me. I felt like a savior. I wanted to fix other people's finances, like paying their rent and utilities for my parents and my sister, and helping with my brother pay his payrolls. And what happens is that, it could be a son that's in trouble with the law or has legal bills. It could be a grandson or granddaughter who has medical expenses. It could be that their daughter is having trouble and can't pay their bills or their utilities. So people will justify their stealing because they're doing it for other people. She said, I did spend a little money on clothes, and we ended up eating at a lot of restaurants. Appeal to higher loyalties is one of the main rationalization or techniques of neutralization used by dental embezzlers. Denial of the victim. They're not smart enough to catch me, and you get what you deserve. How did you feel when you committed the crime? Well, I got really arrogant about it. First, she says, I was very nervous and frightened and sick to my stomach. And I talk about that in my typical case of dental embezzlement course. People will start slow and low, and they'll begin to steal with ever-increasing frequency. And after a while, same thing happened with Amy. I got arrogant about it, and I felt like they weren't smart enough to catch me. And let's look at number 3, denial of injury. And this is another big one for justification from stealing from a dentist. My actions didn't cause any harm. So MarketWatch says, when you were committing the offense, did you convince yourself that it wasn't really wrong? And she said, I always knew it was wrong, but I just thought the law didn't apply to me. It was a private company. And here's the kicker. I thought the family who owned the company was off playing on their boats and having a good time. I justified it more than anything, telling myself they're still able to live up to this after I'm taking all this money. And she told herself these things because she did feel bad. So she denied injury. So what I've observed is that when people begin to steal from a dental practice, unless they're a serial embezzler or they have they've got a checkered past and they're putting their hand into the cookie jar from day one. This is someone who's worked in the office for many, many years. Some circumstances happen, something's happened in their life and it's changed, and they begin to steal. And then what happens is that they steal a few thousand, maybe $10,000 over several months, maybe $20,000 in the first year. And what happens is that doesn't affect the practice owner's lifestyle. The practice owner's not putting as much away into their retirement savings, but they're still getting their new car every 4 years. They're going on spring break. They're sending their kids to college. And the person who's working in the office says to themselves, man, I just stole 20 grand and the doctor didn't even miss it. My actions are not causing any damage or harm. So that's it.